Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our dialogue on promoting resilience and coping skills for caregivers and families with loved ones facing mental health challenges. I'm Julie, an educational psychologist as well as the director of Seek Connections, and I will be the moderator for our dialogue this morning. Now, it gives me great pleasure this morning to introduce our panel of experts. We have Dr. Hera Lukman, a chartered health psychologist with the British Psychology Society, and Dr. Hera has taught psychology for over 20 years in the UK and Malaysia. She's presently focused on enhancing mental health awareness in education and faith-based communities. Her primary goal is to empower educators, faith leaders, peers, and family members to provide effective mental health support and aiming to reduce stigma and misconceptions. We also have here with us Mr. Alex Lui, a clinical psychologist, an active member of Malaysian Society of Clinical Psychology, and he was the former head of Department of Psychology at Help University. Now, Mr. Alex specializes in mental health, neuropsychology, and human development. He has an unwavering commitment to children's welfare, spanning over 12 years through active involvement with Suka Society. Alex's strong belief in the power of words to shape relationship emphasizes the crucial role of effective communication and self-awareness in caregivers' path to resilience. We also have here this morning with us Dr. Eugene T., an associate professor of psychology at Help University. Now, Dr. Eugene is also an editor-in-chief of Asian Journal of Behavioral Sciences, and he is an expert in emotions and positive psychology. He's a TEDx speaker and a regular contributor to BFN's program. As the author and founder of Emotivity, a platform focusing on emotions and emotional intelligence, his book, The Science of Feelings, was recognized by the National Book Council. With his profound understanding of emotions and positive psychology, Dr. T is enthusiastic about helping caregivers apply positive psychology principles for building resilience. Now, I'm so thankful for all of you to be here with us this morning, joining us as panel in our dialogue.
We could start off with our maybe hearing from our panel about any person, if you have any personal experience, or if you have, based on your work with the community or the people that you are in touch with, what sort of mental health challenges or what sort of challenges do you experience or encounter caregivers having? So maybe I can direct you to Dr. Hera first. Hera, you work a lot among young people in the community, and I'm sure there are tons of parents and caregivers coming to you talking about, their challenges and all that. Sorry, Hera, you're muted.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Sorry, hi everybody. I mean, first of all, I think that, I'd just like to thank every one of you, who has joined us this morning. I know that, many of you are caregivers, and it's really, really not easy sometimes, right, to acknowledge that we are caregivers. I know this because, sometimes we don't have a choice but to take on the caregiving role. And I took on the caregiving role of my parents, who both experienced dementia. So both my parents are experiencing dementia. And for those of you who are familiar with dementia somewhat, it is progressively getting worse rather than, any time getting better. So it is a very challenging condition to experience. And then, it is a new thing for me altogether. I mean, I can have the knowledge about dementia, but when it comes to caregiving, it's a totally different ballgame. So that's the personal experience as caregiver, and I'm still learning, and I'm still, trying to grasp many, many things that teach me about myself and about, how I react to things. Yeah, a lot of things surprise me. And it is really a long journey, hard journey, but also I would say a journey that teach me a lot of things, and therefore it's a growing journey. My work, briefly, I do come across many caregivers, of various mental health challenges, from, every day trying to cope with stresses to experiencing mental illness itself. And so there's a wide range of caregivers who find it really challenging. But these individuals, as far as my work is concerned, most, if not all, they really want to care, and to care well, because they love and they want to see their loved one flourish, even in times when they know that they're experiencing a condition that they cannot do much about. So it is, it's empowering to work with, these individuals, and they taught me a lot as well. So that's the area of, my engagement with caregiving.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing your personal experience, as well as sharing some insights into your work as well. I think it's really true that many times caregivers really want to do their best. And I believe that many of us here are basically, trying to look at how we can actually come in as a caregiver, as a community, even before receiving any kind of like treatment or intervention. How can we actually bridge that gap of doing something for our loved ones? So I'm wondering, either Alex or Eugene on your end, whether you could share what, in between, between seeking help perhaps, or being in that state of wanting to know what to do. So there are so many processes that are going on, right? There's a personal process. There's also needing to know what's the next step for perhaps our child or a family member. What are some of the things that we can actually think about, or how can we actually approach situations like that?
Okay, I'll start lah. We were waiting for each other. And maybe before that, maybe I just want to kind of like clarify what caregiving means. I think we care for different people at different stages of our lives. But I think what's unique about caregiving is that a lot of times the people that we care for, they are not going to get better. Yeah, so it's not like the same, like, how you care for your child who has got fever. I mean, that's also in a way caregiving, but that when you care for them, things are going to get better. So there is some kind of a goal, some kind of a, something to look forward to, right? But I think the caregiving that we're talking about, which is why it's so stressful, is like we know that, in this situation, when we care for them, it's not as if like things are going to get better. In fact, most of the time, things are going to get worse. It's going to get harder, which is why it takes such a big toll on us. I think for me, for this session, I want to share also my experience in looking after, my own mother. So like Dr. Hera, it's more dementia, but my mother went through anxiety and depression itself. And it's very interesting because like I myself is a mental health practitioner. I help people deal with depression and anxiety. But when it comes to, living with somebody, that's very, very different. Right? My clients come and see me 1 hour, I talk to them, they'll go back to their own house. But when I come back to my own house, and I see my own mom in that kind of state, and I can't do anything for her, it really triggers certain part of me. In fact, there's one part of me that felt very, very much like a charlatan, like a hypocrite. Like, wow, you help other people with depression, anxiety, but your own mother, you don't know what to do. I think that affected me a lot, right? I think one of the things that probably we want to talk about today is how much, for example, caregiving affects your own mental health and your own physical health at times. Yeah, and we know we cannot afford to get sick because when we get sick, who else is going to look after these people? But usually that's what happened, right? And then in the end, both of us, like we don't know who's sick now. It's like whether the person I'm giving help to is the one who is suffering more than me. Yeah, so I think that's the type of angle that I'm kind of like bringing to this session, and hopefully Hera and Eugene can also like jump in lah. So much so I forgot what was Julie's question already, but that was something that I want to get off my chest before today's session.
Thank you so much for sharing, Alex. If I may just very quickly jump in here to add to what Hera and Alex have already shared. Thank you both for sharing your personal experience. I feel immensely grateful that I've not yet had the challenging circumstances. I hope never to, but I can appreciate and empathize as much as possible the sort of tensions, the sort of struggles and difficulties that come from caring for a loved one, in this case, both your mothers. And I just want to share here that your experience speaks very much to this idea that caring can take a toll on individuals. And so there is a concept, some of you might already be familiar with the term compassion fatigue or empathy burnout, right? It's a sense of certainly obligation. And sometimes there's a tension, isn't it, Alex, to feel that, look, I'm trained in this, I'm professionally qualified to be able to do this, but I can't render the same kind of assistance and support for my own family members, my loved ones, that I do for my clients, right? And the fact that this is an ongoing relationship that you have with your family members, that certainly takes a toll on you. I'm going to unpack that a little bit by just sharing a bit of the science and the evidence behind that. So compassion fatigue, it also comes with it a sense of obligation, but you feel shameful, you feel guilty about feeling that. So generally self-conscious emotions that sometimes leads you to question your worth and your capacity, your capability. Sometimes also known as the negative cost of caring, what we're terming here compassion fatigue. And it's also accompanied with the experience of another's pain, trauma, experiencing it as if we are our own. And don't get me wrong, I think this is an essential part of relating and communicating authentically with others. But we also have to recognize that we have a limited capacity for that. And when we tilt over, spill over to the limits of what we are able to and how much care we can render, that itself can be both psychologically, and I also want to stress physiologically as well, draining. So accompanying that sense of helplessness, maybe irritability, reduced capacity for empathy, certainly physical fatigue, insomnia as well, I think in some cases. So that's generally what the scientific literature says about the experience of compassion fatigue.
Yeah, thanks, Eugene, for your input on, the emotional part of it, compassionate fatigue as we are caring for other people. And I'm also wondering, yeah, so it's also related to my earlier question, right? So I'm wondering, as a caregiver, as we are going through all these processes, right? So there is this physical part to manage maybe the sending of back and forth of your family member to seek help or to seek treatment. Then there is also this internal process of this compassionate fatigue, whereby you really try to pour everything out and give everything, your best to your family and to ensure that they receive the appropriate treatment. What can be done? I think there's a lot of questions among caregivers as to what can actually be done? How do I actually manage these emotions? How do I actually still care for myself, right? And how do I actually, like Alex, when you brought up this term that they are never going to get better, especially when it comes to mental health issues, right? How do we manage all these processes, thoughts, and emotions that are going through?
I think for me, it's it's the realization that I think one thing I learned about myself, I'm quite a control freak. You ask any one of my colleagues, meaning that I like a sense of order, right? I like it very much, and I work towards a sense of order. And while I know knowledge is important to me, because once I know something, then I can actually understand what's going on and then do something about it. And if I don't know, then I'm a bit lost. Yeah. And that's the kind of posture that has been me, and that's me, right? I mean, all of us are different. Yeah, we have different personalities, we have different way of responding to things, and that's okay. But as long as we continue to understand about ourselves and learn about ourselves, and one of those things I learned about myself is that this sense of, needing and needing order, while it is good and it actually helps my career and everything else, in a lot of ways, but it can also be a debilitating thing about me. Because then when my parents got dementia, or they are diagnosed with dementia, both of them, not just one, I am miles away from them. And, I'm in Malaysia, in Canada, and, I instantly feel helpless, instantly. And that helplessness continues, right? Because of this incessant need, to have things in order. And, so I'll be thinking, I'll be losing sleep, and so on and so forth, because of this urge, right? As all caregivers, there's this common urge that, you want to do something to make things better. And I learned that, I need to recognize that I'm actually on a new journey. I need to recognize that, in this new journey, I need to accept the fact that there's going to be a lot of recalibration, a lot of new things, new normal, right? That my world, needs to look quite different in many things I know on the surface, but also things in the future that I may have to anticipate. There's going to be a lot of new things. And I cannot have my world the way it was. And that took me some time. Yeah, it's like a reckoning. Yeah, and although I had it academically in my mind, I mean, like Alex, I'm a psychologist. Of course, I know all these things, technically. But when you have to do it yourself, like, knowing how to cycle in your head doesn't mean you know how to cycle until you cycle. It's one of those things, right? That's why you cannot teach someone how to cycle, but just by reading to them, this is what you do. So I learned that a lot of myself, and it's this thing about arriving at that first plateau, realizing that, okay, I've got to be more flexible about what I think. I have to let go things that I cannot control. So then I start working on things or identifying things I can do and focusing on that, and not letting my helplessness for things I cannot do overwhelm things I can do. So that's a lesson for me, and that is still a lesson that I'm learning on a daily basis, because there are new things that occurs, right? Like this morning, I have messages again from Canada, telling me about my parents' needs. And that rattled me, right? I mean, in my mind, okay, Saturday, I'm going to have a nice session with Julie, and all of you, but no, phone call. And so I need to learn to be okay with that. That is my new normal. That is going to be things that rattle my order. And that is okay. And that's the first lesson I learned about myself. Yeah, to recognize that it is a new journey. Let's recalibrate. And then let's take that step. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of resonated with what Hera says, especially when it comes to acceptance. I think one of the challenges I faced when my mom first experienced depression and anxiety is I don't know how to relate to her, because I've always known her to be a person who is very outgoing, very friendly, very independent. She's that person who enjoys cooking, cleaning up the house and things like that. And then suddenly when she has this thing, she's a totally different person, So I always feel as if it looks like my mother, but it's not my mother anymore. And I don't know how to respond to how to talk to her anymore. I think that's the acceptance is very hard. Some part inside of me, I just wish and hope that she will go back to her normal self. The self that I know, the self that I know how to interact with. And it took me a while before I have to accept that, she's not going to be like that ever. Yeah. So of course, with medication and treatment, she does get better, you know, but she still have her down days once in a while. Yeah, and I think until I accept that, you know, my mom's not going to be exactly the same mom that I had before, then I'm going to be troubled by it. I think it affected me so much to the point that I ended up becoming depressed. And it doesn't help because, especially during the MCO period, right? Now, when I was working, it was easy because I leave work very, very early to go to office. So, and usually that was before my mom wakes up. Yeah, so I don't see what's going on. And then when I come back, it's only just a few hours before she goes to sleep, right? So I only see her for that short period of time. But when I was like working from home, for example, you know, I see her all the time. I come up from my office, I see her sitting at the chair and not doing anything. Because my normal mom that I used to know, you know, she'd be watching TV, she'd be doing things, you know, she'd be cooking something. And that was the mom that I know. So coming out and seeing her sitting and just staring at the wall, you know, it just woke me up. Like, like, why are you like that? And in fact, sometimes I even blame her, like, you know, you purposely trying to be like, you don't want to get well, you know, that kind of anger towards them. Because again, like, you know, it's because you cannot accept that you cannot do anything, so you must blame the other person, no, because for not wanting to be better. Yeah, and that's the type of thing that and then of course there's part of me that also felt guilty because, like, you know, I cannot blame my mom for going through all these things. Right. Yeah. So these are the struggles. I think what's very hard for caregivers is because you spend so much time with the person, you know, and every time you see them, it reminds you of your helplessness. It reminds you about how things are not going to get better, and it affects you. And for me, the way it affects me and is when I have negative thoughts towards myself. You know, I would say things like, especially when I get upset with my mom, you know, there was one time that she didn't want to go take a bath and I actually shouted at her, right? And after you do that, right, yeah, you felt bad, like, why do I even shout at her, right? And then all the negative thoughts kept coming, or you very very bad son lah, you know, shouting at your mother, not being very caring. And even when I go to class, right, these thoughts start coming to my mind, like, oh, you're teaching your students about depression, anxiety, you cannot even help your own mother. Yeah, and if you're not careful, right, those are thoughts that you have inside it will poison you, and it's quite toxic one. Yeah, and then it becomes something that you start believing in, start defining who you are, that you are a useless clinical psychologist, cannot even help your mother, want to help other people. And then that's when it starts. Then in the end, you yourself will start feeling depressed, being low. And that was what happened to me. So in fact, 1 year, right, I was actually struggling with depression myself. So imagine having two depressed people. And it's not only that, it also takes a toll on my wife. You know, it's bad enough already. I have like one person who is going through mental health issue, and now the person who's supposed to be the caregiver is also going through mental health issue. And I'm surprised that she herself didn't end up there. And it's very easy for those sort of things happen, right? Because what's happening is like one person may be ill, but it affects another person, then a person will affect another person, and then in fact the whole family sometimes might actually suffer because of that caregiving. So that's why it's very, very important for us to be aware when all these things are happening. Yeah, I'll let Eugene maybe say something first before I add in about what we can do about it.
I have very little to add to the very human, raw, and very vulnerable sharing that the both of you have shared. I've only experienced something which is a poor reflection of the intense emotions that you've all gone through, having gone through an experience loss. I wasn't a direct caregiver, but I could certainly experience the sort of emotional spillover, if you will. And I think that speaks to the very nature of emotions being expressed by someone else being contagious, right? I think we're past the COVID season. I think we can use the word contagion again. It's not a dirty term, but emotions are contagious. And what you have very clearly highlighted, Alex, is the very nature of how emotions spread and can eventually impact those around us, even if it's, you know, unintendedly so, isn't it? I also want to thank you and applaud you, Alex, for sharing the, you know, providing full disclosure, right? This is a raw, very vulnerable experience, but it also speaks to the acknowledgement of our own vulnerabilities and limits as caregivers as well. I think that's a very powerful message. And I'm sure we'll get to this at a slightly later time, Julie, but this idea of not just humanizing, not just normalizing the conversation about mental health, but humanizing the experience of being a caregiver. I think that can be a very powerful message that is conveyed to anyone in a similar position, to know that they are not alone in this, that there are also others, professionals like yourself, who have entertained really unpleasant thoughts, engage in ruminative thinking, right? That has led you to questioning your own worth and capacity as a caregiver. I want to circle back a little bit very quickly to what Hera has shared earlier on as well on this. And you mentioned, Hera, this adjustment, this recalibration. You call yourself a control freak, your words, right? But I think there's a lot to be said about the value of agency and autonomy. And when your world gets flipped upside down because of a change in your relationships with others, like Alex was mentioning, you know, so I don't recognize my mother anymore because of the state that she is in. She's depressed. And with your mom as well, you know, two parents, Hera, dementia. This idea of meeting them where they are, adjusting, recalibrating, these are all just great ways to describe your resilience. When we think about resilience, which again is another topic that we'll get to, I'm sure, in a bit, it's not just a simple idea, isn't it, of bouncing back. And for that one reason, I don't like the sort of like moved away from the metaphor of resilience as the swaying bamboo branches, right? You just go where the wind takes you. I think that lacks a sense of what we call agency, right? Control is not all that bad. I think what resilience encourages us to do, if we do cultivate it as a skill, are skills that help us positively adapt to the situation, right? So you're not buffeted by the storms of life, but rather you can adjust the sails so that you can head in the direction that you want to head as a caregiver, right? This idea of arriving as well, creating that new narrative, that new story, your new role, given the changes in your parents, both of you. I think that's just, you know, just really speaks to some of the themes of what it means to be resilient in the face of these challenges and struggles.
Thanks, Eugene. So what I'm hearing from you is it's an interesting concept of resilience now, because the idea about resilience is about bouncing back, isn't it? But what I'm hearing from you, it's like it's kind of like a continuum. Like you keep going, you keep being flexible, you keep adjusting. So it's like a continuous process, if I'm hearing it right from you, rather than, you know, recognizing that we fall and we need to, you know, very quickly bounce back as someone that's strong.
Right.
Yeah. And also coming back to maybe what Alex and Hera had also brought in earlier, you know, about all this recalibration, acceptance. There's a lot of emotions involved in it. And I think that one of the common questions that sometimes I get from parents or from people that I know is that, well, we recognize that there is this change in our lives, right? So we recognize that perhaps we have a loved one who is encountering mental illness, or in my work, it's more of like children who are struggling with anxiety or even special needs, right? Well, we recognize that, how do we actually come, you know? So what are like the micro or mini ways that we can actually manage all these thoughts? So what do I do with those awareness, you know? So I know that things will never be the same. But I think the major question is like, how do we actually manage these expectations? Because there is a sense of loss. There is this idealized way of how our family would turn out. How do we actually manage this sense of loss? And in a way, it's a grief process, right? You are kind of like going through this whole denial process to acceptance. How do we actually walk through this whole journey?
Wow, that's a really complex question, Julian. Just a lot of things to unpack there. You're mentioning loss. It sounds very much like what we were, I think, discussing in an earlier conversation on a suppression of emotion, even maybe some kind of unspoken grief, if I've understood that correctly. Yeah,
Yes.
so if you're nodding your head to that, then at least from what I do know from the literature, and I'll let Alex and Hera speak to the experience side of things a little bit more. I think what you referred to as unspoken grief, silent grief, I think that's another term, slightly more complex, disenfranchised grief, but let's just stick with silent or unspoken grief, is that grief that is personal, certainly all grief experiences are personal when we experience the loss of something, a relationship, a valued relationship, or the change in relationship to a point where we don't recognize it anymore. And what we do know is that the suppression can, it can be misleading because individuals don't show this out in the open. They don't express them on the surface. They've, in effect, I think, compartmentalized their grief and loss, effectively withholding what it is that they're genuinely feeling deep down. And we know from the literature, right, without going into details, that the long-term suppression of this without a healthy adaptive outlet for these emotions can have long-term consequences on our psychological and our physical health. Some of the ways, though, that this manifests, before we get into, I think, what I've understood about ways to attend to this grief, right? You'll find people engaging in social isolation, a reluctance or resistance to sharing. For parents, right, it might be a fear of opening up in almost the same way Alex was sharing, right, to be seen as incompetent parents or parents who don't or have not raised the children well enough. The concealment of this, all these troubling emotions, grief in particular, may be, I believe, motivated by the wish to avoid judgment from others, and something to be said about the broader cultural context, about stigma, about the expectations that people have on you as a parent, the wish to be the best parent possible for your children. And some of these, right, would spiral over to leading to other related emotions. We know from the emotions literature that it's not just one emotion, but coming alongside grief might be experiences of anxiety, shame. Shame is a problematic emotion. When you think about, there's a difference between shame and guilt. Shame is, I am not good enough. Guilt is, I am not doing enough. But at least with guilt, right, it prompts you to actually want to do something about the situation. Shame is like, you are broken, you are unworthy, you are undeserving, you are unloved, right? So that hits us at our core a lot more harshly than this guilt. So I've talked so much about the consequences of it, and I'm sure we can unpack this as we go along, because this leads to our conversation on cultivating ways, isn't it, to build up resilience. I think about resilience as positive adaptation, right? And the way in which we think about building resilience across, right? But for caregivers, especially, to think about factors that prevent the psychopathologies that one might be experiencing, anything that prevents, right, or limits the sort of wear and tear on your psychological well-being. So what we call protective mechanisms. But then there are also approaches. I don't think we speak enough about promotive factors, things that elevate you, right? Things that allow you to craft a new sense of meaning, a new sense of identity, a new story in the relationship between yourself and the people that you're caring for. So many a times I've heard, right, and well-meaning, certainly evidence-based approaches to addressing problems, all the stuff that we've heard about in terms of unraveling or challenging negative thoughts, right? Then you have also suggestions on how you might stop chatter and rumination. But on top of that, I think that can be complemented with approaches that help craft out new meaning, right? To focus on things that, as hard as it might be, right, the situation and what it is that we are grateful for, benefit finding in the situation, the opportunity to spend more time with your loved ones, maybe come up with a new hobby, right? It could be even the smallest or the most mundane of things, but really not thinking about just preventing or addressing, but finding ways to promote well-being. So I'll stop here because it might turn into a little bit of a lecture. I believe the audience would appreciate real-life experiences from both Alex and Hera.
Hera, you're muted.
Sorry, it's an instinct. I just mute myself. Yeah, it's a really, really tough question. There's a lot of things to unpack, and what Eugene was telling us, about how we need to look at things that promote well-being, and those are all very, very important. Yeah. And it's just that, when I'm thinking about the question that Julie was asking, it is about grief. Grief is not just limited to when someone dies on us, right? Grief is anything that we losing or have lost, any loss. And to be honest with you, about my parents, I sense a great deal of loss, and that loss is not just a one-time loss; it's repeated loss, like, and it's it's really hard to deal with that kind of loss. Yeah, like for example, about a month ago, I went back to Canada, Vancouver, to see my parents, and wow, I'm and I find myself going through grief again, right? Because this time around, my parents is not so quick to recognize me. I resonate with Alex in terms of like, looking at your mom and thinking you're so different. I mean, in my case, I think that difference is a little bit more positive, because my mom used to be a very anxious, critical woman, and then the dementia made her quite happy. Okay, so sometimes things just happen kind of weird. Different people have different experiences on that. I mean, that's not something I grieve about, but that's something I rejoice. Oh, good, my mom is happier, right? So she's making life a lot easier for everybody around her. But it's not easy when your mom can't recognize you, because it's sort of like, break that sort of understanding, and that about your relationship with this person that you deeply love, and then you suddenly find yourself, oh my goodness, who am I to you? Right? And how am I going to deal with that? I know dementia has that, okay, but when the rubber hits the road, wow, I just find it very tough, and I grieve, right? And I think what I learned about myself is that I need to grieve, yes, and I cannot stop the sense of loss. It's quite silly to want to stop that, right? And if anybody in your life tell you to stop grieving, don't go out for coffee with them, right? Because I think they add on to your grief. I think when we want caregivers, you must be, one practical things that I learned is that we must choose who we tell our problems to. We must choose the people that we can, find ourselves being refilled, rather than losing energy that we don't have already. Yeah. So that's something practical. Choose the people that you share with. The people who can understand about emotion. These are individuals who learn and study about things that matter, things that interest them. They study it because they love you. They want to walk alongside you. And so they educate themselves about things like emotion, things like grief, things even about the condition that your loved one is going through, so that when they walk alongside you, they know what they're handling. Yeah, and this is what I think another practical thing that we need to do is know that grief is part and parcel of life. You cannot just wish it away. And if you are in that state, you are still not moving. I think I just need to remember one word: move, right? And if I'm not moving from my status quo, then I'm not doing that well. I need to move. It doesn't matter what that move looked like. From last month when I visited my parents, my move is that moving from my grief of like, oh no, I've lost my parents, but then, they're still here. My move is, because I didn't have a lot of days in Vancouver, my move is, okay, so be it. I'm just going to tell them who I am, and we're going to have a conversation. We're going to just go for lunch. Instead of really being inundated by my grief and then withdrawing because of that grief, right? We need to move in the right direction, but we need to move because that status quo is not going to take you anywhere. It's not going to change your environment. It's not going to change your situation. We know that life needs to go on, right? And so the practical thing is be realistic about the things that you will experience in caregiving, the grief, the multiple griefs. And be realistic that if you just do nothing about it, it's not going to help you go forward. Life will continue even if you don't move, but life is not going to be as manageable if you don't move. So I think we all have that journey. We come to that plateau. That's what I'm saying. And there are many plateaus in this journey. Take it as a marathon. It's not a sprint, right? It's a marathon. So maybe we can manage our expectation more realistically and move, find ourselves working hard to move so that, we can manage the new normal. And sometimes new normal is the consistent constant in our caregiving. So that's something I find helpful. So whenever I am grieving and I find myself grieving again, I don't beat myself to it, right? I used to. Like Alex, for goodness sake, you're a psychologist, you know about this, It's like, oh, no. Knowledge alone is not enough, right? If you don't do anything about the knowledge, it stays just that knowledge. And I need to apply what I know. But it takes time, it takes, conviction, it takes, a realization. And sometimes it takes a lot of humble realization. And it makes me, it works on my humility, so to speak, right? And so it is very heartbreaking, but I also know what is the bottom line. So you can't move in all directions. You got to move in the correct direction. And my direction, as I analyze my caregiving, is always this word. I only got 2 words that keep keeping me going. Number 1 is move. Number 2, move to where? Move to the bottom line. What is the bottom line? For me, with my parents, the bottom line is I love them. They are my parents. Nothing's going to change that. So the bottom line is I'm going to care for my parents, no matter, along the way, what happened, what they're going to say, what they're going to do, it's very frustrating. But bottom line, they are my parents. I care for them. I love them. And nothing is going to change that. So even if the person changes, which many conditions will do that to a person, it doesn't change our relationship. So that is my bottom line, right? And so whatever that I can think of practically, I do that. And, it's a learning process. It's very hard to have a manual of what is exactly things that you must do. But I somehow have this, I work out a principle, right? To move to the bottom line. What is the bottom line? I keep asking that question because sometimes I move, but not to the bottom line. Like, for example, when my mom don't want to bathe, I will just go into rationale as to why you need to bathe. Bathing is a good thing, and I bought you all these things. It's really nice, you'll feel nice, blah, blah, blah. And I find myself, oh my goodness, what's the bottom line here? And at that point, I thought, oh, okay, I'm just trying to explain, but explanation is not what I need to do. Right? So I learned a lot of these things. So I'm still learning, but I guess that's some of the practical things that I could share with you.
Yeah, when Eugene talked about guilt, right, that's very, very real to me. And especially when he said one of the things that guilt make you do, make you think is that you're not doing enough, right? So to deal with that guilt, I try to do even more, and sometimes the doing even more doesn't always help, but in fact, it actually exhausts you. I think being real, I think we're going there now, right? Like what can we do is we have to admit that actually we don't have all unlimited resources. There's a limit to our physical energy. There's a limit to our mental and emotional energy. And what it means is sometimes, but it's funny because the guilt drives you to do even more, but that itself is counterproductive because in the end, you exhaust yourself and you cannot do more. And then that will add on to your guilt. So it's like a vicious cycle, and that makes you feel more guilty, makes you feel like you should do even more, then you exhaust yourself, you cannot do any more, then you feel even more guilty. So what it means is there are certain things that sometimes we have to ask ourselves, is it possible for me to let somebody else do it? For my example, I've been cooking during that time because we wanted to save money lah. And then of course my mom is a bit particular about what she likes to eat. So we cooked, but then I realized that's actually taking up a lot of my energy. Right. So we decided, okay, let's cater lah. Never mind lah, my mom complained, it's okay. But at least it frees up my time to do other things. Right. So if you can, especially those of you who have the financial capacity of hiring maybe a helper or something like that, do that. Sometimes the guilt makes us feel like, hey, this is my own mother, ma. Why should I should ask other people to do that for her, right? So again, you have to be realistic, lah. As much as you want to do everything for them, you cannot. And that is and asking other people or paying other people to do things for your mom doesn't mean that you care less, right? I think we also need to remember that we need to care for ourselves also, because if I myself is not in the position and all tired out, I cannot be helpful. And in fact, I'll be worse. I'll get angry, I'll get irritable. Yeah, so that's one very practical things we can do. So ask yourself, like, is there anything that actually I don't have to do? So even things like, for example, sending your, my mom to the hospital. Last time I really insist that I must be the one who brings her to the hospital, but that also takes up my time, right? And then get frustrated because I'm still working, doing other things. Yeah, then in the end, we just hire somebody, to bring mom to the hospital and bring her back, right? And that ease up a lot of your time, and then you can breathe a little bit more. Yeah, so those are very, very practical things, and we don't have to feel guilty about it, because and I think what Hera said, very important, who you tell your problem to. Because one of the things about this caregiving, right? You share with people, and then people give you all kinds of advice, and then sometimes those advice makes you feel even more guilty, right? Like for example, when people hear that, oh, how come you never bring your mother to the hospital? How come you ask other people to do it? Then it makes you feel as if, oh, wow, you're such a terrible son, that the other people to do it. And those sort of things can sometimes affect you, right? So choose who you tell it to and choose who you listen to, right? And then you get all kinds of different advice. You should do this, you should do that. And then in the end, you get very, very confused, and you feel as if like, how come I never do that? And then it adds on some more to your guilt because you feel like, oh, actually there's so many things I could have done which I didn't do, right? And so be careful, right? I mean, you can't help it lah. Sometimes you still have to tell people, but just be mindful of what you listen. You don't have to listen to everything that people say, right? Don't forget, this is your mother. They are not staying with you. They don't understand the things that you go through. Of course, people are just trying to be helpful lah. They're trying to give you advice, but you don't have to take all their advice. You still decide for yourself what's best for you. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to add a little bit to what Alex was saying, about what people say. Yeah, I mean, seriously, we can't escape from what people be saying. They're so quick in volunteering, right? And so, quit trying to escape other people. Just let them express what they express, because to be honest, a lot of people or rather unintentionally express these things to put a lot more burden on us, right? They unintentionally do that because they have very, very good intention and that they love you, they want the best for you, and therefore they're doing all these things. Try to have that a picture of them trying to help, but then after that, right? I mean, for things that are not really helpful. And don't spend your energy trying to correct them. I think that's me, because I got really, really tired. Because I'm really tired. I said, I don't need another group that I just need to explain. No, not at that time. Okay, that's the worst time. When you're tired, you try to explain and try to put people right, Never mind if they have a very, very wrong idea of what dementia is, what depression is, and then they say all sorts of things like, eat like this grass, that grass, I knew that there was once when I was really quite severely ill, somebody gave me a whole box of something that I don't know what is. And to be honest, I'm really, really tired. I didn't have energy to argue or to state my perspective. I just thanked them, take the box and leave it as that. Right. So sometimes these are the things that, we learn about ourselves, right? These are the things that we have to say, okay, you know what? I'm going to just let that go. Let it go. Nice to sing a song. I'm like, just let it go. Right. And I think that lesson of not necessarily having input in everything, control in everything, it is a good exercise. Because ultimately, caregiving is about flexibility. Caregiving is about adapting, right, to very quick changes, and that's resilience as well. And so that's something that is like a practice that we can do. So yeah, let them stop.
in your sharing, Hera, on this, when you mentioned move several times, right? Yeah, I think that's such a great point to add on top of what we've all been discussing here, and your acknowledgement that, well, I can rationalize it. I have I hold in my mind, right, my years of experience in the field, my knowledge, right, my book knowledge, right? But life doesn't have its own playbook, right? Your circumstances and your challenges are going to be different from that of the well-meaning individuals who come over and give you that bottle of, what was it, some kind of root or herb, right? As a
Yeah, which I don't know what is, right? So no
yeah.
ingredient one, it's just a box of things.
You absolutely exemplify this idea of agency, and a lot of what positive psychologists what they suggest when it comes to the treatment of psychopathologies, right? So there's been recent developments in the area that combines both positive psychology with clinical psychology, and quite central to that, and what you exemplify beautifully, is this notion that I gotta keep moving. I gotta keep finding ways to actually put that one foot in front of the other. It may be very difficult. It may be very challenging. Some days I don't put the full foot in front of the other, but I am progressing towards a stage in which this is where I want my role to be as a caregiver, and my role as a daughter to my parents to be. I'm reminded of a quote, right? And sometimes it's so easy to be paralyzed by indecision, and just say like, no, I can't do this. I don't have enough within me. It's a quote by the psychoanalyst Irvin Yalom, and some of you might be familiar with him. And a friend of mine just shared this quote, which again speaks very neatly to what you've just shared. He says that existence cannot be postponed, right? So I think that it really just captures the essence of being there, moving forward, right? Alex, to your point on outsourcing, if I can use the term, right, or delegating, or finding someone to do the work, a useful way, and I've found this from my own mom's experience that she's caring for her mother as well, to say that, look, I'm going to emphasize much more the quality time that I have with my mother. If there are certain things that can be, some assistance that can be rendered to my mother, that will free up more time so that I can connect and have more quality attention time with her, then yeah, she's also, I should add, just as a little bit of personal experience, she's also been able to set aside some money to hire a helper to be there to provide that care for her. They live about an hour apart, right? So she doesn't get to see her very often. My mom doesn't get to see her mother very often. But when they do, wow, the moments are really much more filled with joy, with the sense that, I'm getting better. I feel that I'm being cared for. And so they're both fully present in that moment, right? And being able to just share in that moment with one another.
Yeah, I think Hera, Alex, and Eugene, you guys have already started addressing, the themes on self-care, which many of us here are kind of like, interested to find out, right? How do we actually care for ourselves? How do we, what sort of tools can we hang on to, to care for ourselves? And what I'm hearing is that all these tools are basically internal to, I mean, it starts with an internal process that comes from acceptance. Then you also have to be really practical about things that's happening around. And sometimes we actually don't see that it's little things in life that makes us physically, emotionally, and mentally tired. I think I don't see it so much as like a person caring for, I don't have any family members that is going through like what Hera or Alex, your own parents are. But when you were talking a little bit about outsourcing and all that, it just made me reflect on my own parenting journey, because it really feels, yeah, that sense of guilt, right, makes me feel that I just need to do more. As a working mom, I need to do more for my kids. I'm already absent from, I'm not being there for them for like a good 8 to 9 hours a day. So when I'm back home, I really need to cook for them, and I need to cook a balanced meal for them. And if I don't do that, then it's like I'm owing them something. But apart from that, I also recognize that one of the things that made me do that in the earlier part of my parenting journey was basically this thing about expectations. It's about living up to other people's expectation. It wasn't my expectation, actually, it wasn't. In fact, you know, if you ask my husband, he would say, outsource that, you know, you can tapao, can do all this kind of thing. Why are you, you know, torturing yourself and things like that? But it was more of this thing about, you know, what will actually other people think about me if I do things like that? And I think it touches on what, you know, like both, or like all of you have mentioned, you know, it's like, yeah, what do people actually, you know, the some of our actions, it's because of what we are acting out, because of what we think other people might think about us. And yeah, I think, you know, the biggest thing is the biggest issue there is like handling our own expectations and what we really need, getting to the bottom line of what's needed within our family. I'm also wondering, you know, along those lines, right, when we are talking about self-care, and we definitely recognize that as we are going through, even if we are doing all these things, right, as we are practicing self-care, as we are trying to find practical ways of handling things, there is also this sense of burnout, isn't it? Like, we can't avoid this sense of burnout. We can't avoid this emotional state that we are in. Do you have any thoughts on how we can actually handle, or again, like bite-sized information that perhaps we can take with us on how to manage this sense of tiredness or fatigue?
I have a list here that I could just very quickly rattle off. Just as practical suggestions, you were mentioning bite-size recommendations, Julie. Burnout is what we will call an occupational hazard. So there's something within the environment that is causing you to feel prolonged and intense experiences of emotional exhaustion. So tired that I cannot care anymore is pretty much a caregiver's lament. So as for very quick suggestions, I think a lot of suggestions you would have already, the audience members would have heard of already, focus on, you know, approaches centered around the mind, thoughts, thinking traps, biases. I'm just going to quickly expand on that by saying as well, the mitigation of stress, burnout, or anything that wears you down. I think that also needs to include a more holistic perspective on top of mind, also body and soul. So when you think about some of the areas of the new science that's told us, right, an intimate connection between mind and body. I think your mind needs your body, your physical health a lot more than we often give itself credit for. And there's the aspect of spirituality and religion. I think faith is a very powerful safeguard. In fact, it's such a personal and important part of so many of your identities, right? And we do know that holding on to whatever your belief systems are, right? Either you're religious or spiritual, or you're not religious but spiritual, that those are some of the suggestions. Those are areas more specifically cultivating or having, let me just share with you one, cultivating that sacred moment, right? So that's an intervention that some of you can try. And this comes from the spirituality research to say, hey, you hold on to an object, right? And you hold on to, it could be an heirloom, it could be something of personal value, it could be a journal, it could be an artifact, something that just has really sacred meaning to you. And to just hold on to that, just to reflect upon that, think about it. You can journal about it, think about it, and just bring to mind what is it that's so important about that item that you've infused it with a sense of personal meaning. Found that to be quite helpful in times, right, when I've experienced loss, in remembrance of people who no longer are in my life. My family also experienced loss recently. And so that was something that we held to, and that was just a reminder that today's sorrow and miseries don't overwhelm the many years of cherished memories and experiences that we have with the departed. So that's one suggestion.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, as you know, sometimes when we talk about self-care nowadays, you know, we have a whole list of things, and you know, we ask ourselves, okay, you know, have I done this, right? And I think my take to it is that all those activities are really, really good. And, you know, it's like a toolbox, right? You choose whichever that is suitable and whichever that works for you. Though there is no, you know, self-care that is fantastic and works for everybody. And there is no self-care that, you know, you shouldn't do that and stuff like that. But I think as I think about self-care, again, I keep telling myself, the two words, right, that keep me going. And one is actually move. The other one is what's the bottom line. So what's the bottom line of self-care? And for me, sometimes it's like, sometimes there's so many things in the world, so many voices, that we somehow get distracted from the bottom line. Bottom line for me, so self-care is you eat well, you sleep well, you exercise. That's the bottom line. Because those three are essential, whether we like to do or not, especially like, we like eating, but forget about exercise. Can I just eat? Eating is all exercise. I move my mouth. I think it's really, really tough, to do the things that we don't want to, especially when we are tired. And the things that we don't think we need, we sacrifice first. So sometimes you can actually pursue self-care activity at the expense of your bottom line. And if you're not sleeping well, you're not eating well, you're not exercising, that means getting the sun. Please don't be afraid of the sun. You need vitamin D. And you know what? A tan look is beautiful. So go out in the sun, at least 5 or 10 minutes a day, like succulent, you need sun. Really good for you, evidence-based, succulent pula. Evidence-based, sunshine, okay, they're both S. They're good for your mental health. So go out there, right? And get what is the bottom line. Because to me, self-care, we talk about how much we care for our loved ones and how much we want to do so much more for our loved ones and how much we feel guilty that we didn't do enough. But you know what? If we can do self-care, we are doing a lot more for our loved one. Because if we are not doing self-care, we are not helping our loved one. Full stop, bottom line. And so do you have a choice? No, you don't have a choice. You may think you have a choice, especially when your guilt plays in and say, no, you can just, forget about this first. Go and care this one first. Go and do this one first. Forget about, exercising. Well, I'm going to spend a lot of time doing, no, forget it. I'll just do this first, right? You're not helping your loved one. And that's the bottom line. So whatever self-care activity that you pick up, right? Make sure that your bottom line is met. Sleep, eat, exercise. But don't exercise at night. You will not sleep well. Exercise in the daytime. Get yourself some sun. You'll be surprised how energizing if you can do just these three. And they're economical. You don't have to spend a huge sum of money. And self-care doesn't have to be, literally, okay, I think shopping is arguably a self-care activity because, you can create more problems now. I think good self-care activities don't create problems, new problems. They refuel you. They reduce your distress and hence problems. But they don't add to it, yeah? But some self-care activity in the initial bit may be helpful, but as you go along, it may add problem to you. And I think we need to recognize that because some of these quote-unquote self-care activity can be easily obtainable, and they are easily comforting. They're effective in terms of short-term, but they're not good, sustainable self-care activity. And I will name a few specifically. Alcohol. During the pandemic, many people reach out for alcohol for comfort. I'm not saying all, but I'm saying some. And as a result, in time, that creates more problems. Mm-hmm. Right? And so pick your self-care activity, things that work for you, but reaching the bottom line, right? Eat well, sleep well, exercise. And you can do this with a group of people, which, you combine it, right? Because you don't have time to socialize maybe, but you still have self-care activity, then do it with other people, eat with other people. Okay, depends on who you sleep with, but, exercise with other people. Get the sun together with other people. you will find that really refueling at the end of the day. So I guess that's my view about self-care.
Yeah, and I also feel that, just because you take on the role of caregiver, right? You cannot your own life cannot stop. And I think there's a danger of just taking up the role of caregiver so much that you forgot all your other roles. So when the role as caregiver doesn't work out very well, you don't see any more worth in your other areas of your life. And that's what some people they do, right? They like give up their job, and then they start taking care of their parents at home, and then suddenly all their life identity is just based on this caregiving, which is very, very unhealthy. So I think I always prefer if you just spread your roles and responsibility across different areas. It's like not carrying all your eggs in one basket, like. So if you only have one caregiving basket, and that basket doesn't work very well, then you feel like there's nothing else worth about me. Yeah, and also I think one thing that Hera mentioned is about doing things with other people. I think it's very important that we don't isolate ourselves, and that's what a lot of people tend to do when they are become caregivers. Because no time, right? And too tired already. By the time I do all these things, I just don't feel like going out with people. I don't feel like calling up people. I think that's very bad, because now you may end up having those people who will give you all kinds of advice. But I think being with people is better than not being with people at all, because you just want to avoid all those other things. Because when you spend too much time with a person who is sick, sometimes there's a lot of negativity, right? Obviously, I mean, I'm not going to be like, I mean, not everybody is like, hey, I can have this joy when I'm sick. Most of the time, sick people, they drain your energy. They are very negative. And you spend too much time with them, you also feel very, very negative in terms of your life view. So it's important for us to actually go out with people. Now, if you don't want to go out with people that you can start new groups. Like, for example, what I did when I was going through my caregiving was like I took up martial arts. Yeah, something that I probably will never ever do, but it's just something so different in my life. And to the point that I meet new people, right, who doesn't know about my so they won't be asking me about my mother, or things like that adds on to it. Yeah, but it's important that I still be in touch with other people for other things. Yeah, so whenever I'm stressed with my caregiving work, I turn to this new role that I have. So I think creating different things for ourselves, so that my life is not just about caregiving. I think that's also very, very important that we can do as part of self-care.
I'm wondering, Eugene, do you have anything to add on to?
I'm nodding in agreement to what you've shared, Hera, Alex. Very little to add, but I'm just gonna commend and applaud the both of you for suggesting, hey, these are steps, these are things that we can do ourselves, right, as an active approach towards self-care. Hera, your point on physical activity is just so important, and there's a ton of research really emerging right now that tells us that it's equally as effective as some antidepressants as well in alleviating our mental health. On the role of social support, right, Alex, there's another book that speaks to this very theme that you're saying, that the reason why a lot of people are in the sort of depressed state being one of them, right, or experiencing a whole host of mental health disorders, is because what the author calls lost connections, right? The sense of isolation, the sense that no one in the world knows or feels what it is that I'm going through. But just to be in the company of others, and just to feel that you matter, that you click with, that you're accepted to be part of that group, that is a very, very powerful antidote, right, to isolation, loneliness, and all the negative emotions that result from a sense of being disconnected from other people. So I'm just going to summarize very quickly. Exercise is important, sleep is important, healthy nutrition is important, making sure that you stay connected with, be a part of social circles that can offer that support, right? That acceptance, a sense that you matter, that there's someone still looking out for you, right? That's your suggestion, Alex. I think these are all just great points that really sidestep a little bit, not to say that it replaces, right? But it's such a powerful complement to all the other suggestions for self-care, seeking therapeutic assistance, drugs even, right? So these really are approaches that you can take at very minimal cost, right, towards enhancing your self-care and your overall well-being.
Hera, you're muted.
I'm so sorry. I just have one thing to add to what, Eugene has said. And, as I was thinking about caregiving, I don't know what, who your care receiver is. And I think some of us here may have children who we are caring for, and maybe we are parents, in this group. And, when you do self-care, it's not just actually doing things for us, self-care. It's not just for ourselves, but it's also a modeling for your children.
That's right.
And especially if your children is having mental health issues, when they see you doing self-care, it'd be great if they join you doing self-care in activity if they can, but not all the time, because you need to do this for yourself. Then they see you do it, they understand the importance of self-care. And then, if they're old enough, you can have conversations about self-care. And it takes you a long way in terms of having conversations about your relationship. And everything else under the sun. It really helps. So it's not, you're not just doing this for yourself. Self-care is not selfish. It's not self-centered. That's all. And that's why it's so essential to see, distinguish that, and to see the benefit of having self-care. It's good for the people you're caring for as well.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Hera. I was just thinking about this thing about self-care, and many times, what I hear from parents especially is that there's the lack of time of doing that, right? There's no time, and if you are handling a child with mental health issues, you are sending them for therapy, you are meeting other needs, educational needs and things like that, there is just limited time and resources. But what I'm also hearing from you, Hera, is that it goes back to the bottom line. And this is something that I wish, right? Even, we just typically developing kids, I wish people would have told me earlier on. Because honestly speaking, I did feel that self-care was selfish earlier in my parenting journey, because it felt like, how could I just think about myself when these three little people are depending on me for their own development? But if I'm hearing what that's coming from, Hera, Alex, as well as Eugene, is actually really little practical steps. And it gets to the bottom line of just ensuring that you have sufficient sleep, you get exercise. I mean, if someone had told me that, exercise is self-care, I would just baby carry my kids and, just bring them along for a walk and a jog. It would have worked. Yeah, so I think it's being, I like how it can be really practical, although that I mean, I do hear a lot of parents telling me that, I can't take that time off to go out with my friends, I can't do this and that. But actually, if we look at the bottom line, there are little things that we can do, go to a corner and have a coffee by ourselves, or even I think like setting up a little, over WhatsApp support group. I'm not sure. I think that would help as well, because it just makes me reflect on again, it's a parenting journey. I have friends whereby we are in this parenting group, and whenever there is issues or we get a little upset about our parenting journey, we are just bantering among ourselves, and then and these are people that I chose to allow in my circle. So that's also very important. So I'm thinking that, these are really, really practical ways. So I'm also wondering at this juncture whether anyone has any questions for our panel. And if you have any thoughts or comments, please feel free to either type it into the chat box, or you can even just unmute yourself and ask questions.
Before that, it reminded me what one of my colleagues tell her children. So she says, mommy's going to leave you for a while so that when I come back, I can be a better mommy. So I think that's kind of sums it up about those people who feel guilty about, taking time off. Just to look after themselves.
That's so true. That's so
That's
true.
true.
Yeah.
I think we have a question from Alicia. Is it? I see the hand raised up.
Yes, hi. Good morning. Good morning. Is it Dr. Julie, right?
I'm Julie.
Okay. It's really nice meeting you, having to see you in the morning. Actually, I'm really interested in this topic because it's actually very related to my dissertation. I'm in my practicum semester, so next semester will be my internship. So if there's any way I can do internship in your facility, that would be so interesting, so exciting. But yeah, one of these things that I would like to ask, like my question would be, let me just lower down my hand. Okay, so what was it again? Okay, so like earlier in this sharing today, you mentioned that Dr. Hera, she mentioned that dementia is somewhat like a blessing or a disguise, like based on sharing by Alex and also Hera, can be a blessing or a disguise. I was just wondering if this is an indicator, or can it be caused by stress, like extra too much of stress handled during the early years of adulthood, like young adulthood, middle-aged adulthood. Can this lead to dementia?
So Alicia, you are asking whether early adulthood influences can actually lead to dementia.
Yes, stress, like,
Stress
too much stress, overload of stress during early adulthood and middle-aged adulthood. Can this lead to dementia, or can this increase the chances of dementia?
Okay, whether stress can be a contributor to dementia.
That's a very stressful question.
The silence.
Yeah, you can tell it's a very stressful question. Yeah, Alicia, all the best for your dissertation. I think that there's a host of information that you can get about, the causes of dementia. I think, the short answer to that is that we don't know what caused dementia as of current, but there are many things that may contribute. And one of those things that is relevant to today is that, we need to encourage a lot more social activities, community engagement, right? And this you cannot start in your elderly years. You need to start now. Now is the time. So if you're socially active, that is one protective factor. Not to say that socially active people don't get dementia, but that is something that we can do. Second thing that is relevant is you need to exercise. There you go again, exercise. So yeah, bottom line. Yeah. So you see, I think, a lot of us think that exercise is like what WHO tell us, which is this is standard, 150 hours, 150 minutes, right? A week. But there are other current studies that is coming out that actually less time than that. The important thing is consistent exercise. So you can spend 10 minutes exercising, and that's sufficient. Of course, exercising, I don't mean just raising your fingers and changing the channel. It's, it's got to be able to make your heart, beat faster, and, for you to be a bit panting, right? And for you to do some weight exercises, especially if you're a woman, because those are the things that help us. And so when it comes to dementia, back to your question, there are a lot of factors. And so, yeah, lots of websites that could tell you on that. So that's the way that I would respond to that question for myself. Maybe Alex and Eugene might want to add to that.
Thank you, Hera. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Anything to add on from Alex or Eugene?
Oh yeah, so the short is we don't know lah. But yeah, but basically, I mean, dementia is it's a brain thing, right? So we talk about neurons, we talk about synapses and things like that. And of course, when you lose those, either the cells themselves or the synaptic connection, that can lead to dementia. So essentially, anything that prevents that from happening, can reduce the how to say that, like how fast dementia yeah, so like for example, I mean there are research that shows that people who have higher education, for example, I mean they still get dementia. It's just that it doesn't deteriorate as much, yeah, but we still don't understand, at this point in time, like what makes certain connections get lost, for example. But essentially, if you don't use it, you lose it lah. And why exercise is so important is because our brain is a living object, right? It requires oxygen, it requires nutrients. Yeah, so anything that can increase the level of oxygen and nutrients to the brain can essentially keep the brain cells healthy. Yeah, so which is why, exercise is so important. Yeah, even more so than what people say doing Sudoku or playing Mahjong. In fact, the research shows that exercise itself could be one of the factors that actually mitigate between the experiencing of early dementia in older generations. Yeah, I mean, that's something to add.
Okay, then thank you so much, Alex. I really like your what is that called? Like when you mentioned earlier about early caregiving. I mean, caregiving. I think does not just apply to mental health professionals or doctors, health professionals. It also applies to people, everyone, like me, even as students. And we have to also understand the fact that students come from all kinds of backgrounds, and they have like children to take care of, the parents to take care of. So that's already like a mental load there that they have to look out for, which is what they have to do in order to like increase their resilience, so that when they come to face their clients or their, it helps them to be better engaged, better focused, and to provide better health care to their clients. So I'm really grateful also that you shared about this as well. Thank you so much, Alex.
I think another thing I would like to say about dementia is that my father has vascular dementia, and Alicia, there are many types of dementia, yeah. And my father has vascular dementia, my mother has Alzheimer's, and these two are very different kind of dementia. And I want to bring it back again to self-care. That is bottom line, eating well and exercising, because vascular dementia is something that you can do something about. Right? Alzheimer's is less so, but then vascular dementia you can. So, I think, again, the bottom line is that we can only do what we can, but we must do what we can. So as best as we can, right? So that, I think, is what I would like to encourage all of us, to continue with our self-care.
So Julie, just very quickly, the theme of the conversation here, I am picking out a healthier body for a healthier brain, and I'm in full agreement with Alex in that there's a lot new and emerging over the past 20 years at least on something called brain-derived neurotrophic factors. And these are proteins, if I'm not mistaken, that spur growth in the brain. So not neuroplasticity, but neurogenesis, the creation of new brain cells. And the operative sort of like mechanism, if you will, is something called BDNF, right? Brain-derived neurotrophic factors. The best way to incite your brain to grow itself is to exercise. And there's a lot of programs being rolled out in the States that have incorporated exercise at the start of the day, right? And to hit the minimum required number. And frequency is, of course, important, but I think there's a certain number to that as well. Harold, you would correct me if I'm wrong, but this has been shown to have not just an ameliorative or protective effect against mental health disorders, but also promote student cognitive abilities. So over time, this is, I think it's going to serve to be a promotive, protective at the very least factor against, neurodegenerative diseases.
Yeah. So exercise, everyone. We all need to get into that. It's the most basic thing to get to the bottom line of everything, especially self-care. So I'm wondering whether there is any other questions, because we are almost towards the end of our dialogue over here. And maybe for the panels, if you have one wrap-up thought to share, or one final idea or any thoughts, basically. for
Okay,
a
I'll start.
take-home message. Yeah.
I don't know whether it's a take-home message, but it's a thought that came to my mind. I just think that, you know, as caregivers, you must realize how important you are and how essential you are in the work of care for your loved one. You are indispensable, and therefore you are the expert of this whole situation of caregiving. The experts out there, the professionals, they have their own realm of expert, but you are the expert for the person you are caring for. And so therefore, do not outsource the expertise, right? Recognize the expertise and move to the direction of that bottom line. And bottom line is, right, the fact that you're here today is because you love your loved one and you want to give them the best. And the best is you. And so that's my thought. I'll leave you with that.
Thank you, Hera.
Yeah, I'll let Eugene have the last word, so I'll go first. I think for me is be kind to yourself. You know, like, I mean, do your best. You cannot do enough. You know, I don't think any one of us can do enough, but know that I mean, yeah, just know when it's sufficient, you know, based on whatever capacity that you have. Also realize that at the end of the day, you know, none of our loved ones, not even us, are going to live forever, right? Sooner or later, you know, no matter how well you take care of them, they're going to go one day, just like we are all going to go one day. Yeah, but as long as, you know, it's not something that you regret not doing later, right? So I'm sure you might be going through a lot of difficulty now, but when all this is done, you know, you can look back and said that, you know, I did my best for so and so a person. I think that's how we want to end our caregiving journey. And of course, I'm sure one day we might end up in that kind of situation as well. And like what Hera said, the modeling is very important. You know, how our children see, especially those of us who have children, right? How our children see us looking after, you know, the elderly or whoever it is. They will pick it up later on, and one day the recipient may be us, right? Yeah. So I think it's important for us to give that model and do it with joy as much as possible, realizing our constraints as well, not to be too harsh on ourselves. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Alex. Eugene.
I'm going to be succinct and just to keep to the letter as best as I can. Self-care is not selfish. Self-compassion is not selfish. Sometimes the best thing you can do when caring for others is to care for yourself.
Thanks so much, Eugene. Yeah. So I think, you know, coming together for this, we just wanted all caregivers, or, you know, even if you're not a caregiver out there, you most probably one day will be in different aspects of life. We just wanted to come together and acknowledge that we recognize that this is a challenging journey. We recognize that, you know, by you being here, it's really taking time off, trying to get all the tools and learning what you can to further support the people that you love. So we recognize this struggle and this challenge, but just like what, you know, Hera, Alex, and Eugene has been emphasizing a lot on, we can only do what we can. And what has been shared in the past hour or so, it's really little tips, little things, practical tools that you can actually carry with you with very limited, I think, financial or time resources that is needed, that you can just carry with you. And it's really essential to help support you through this journey. So yeah, I would just echo what, you know, all the rest have said. Be kind to yourself, care for yourself, and we do what we can for the people that we know. So thank you so much for your time. And for joining us this morning. Thanks once again to Hera, Alex, and Eugene for your input and for this whole conversation. If you have any questions, you can always drop us an email and we will try our best to respond to you. This session has also been recorded, so we will eventually have it up at our website for those of you who wants to review it, or if you want to share to other fellow caregivers that you think that it can further support them. So do go ahead and share this along with me. So thank you so much, and have a good weekend. Bye, everyone.